Well, I think it's important to realize that values were not really written down at the beginning. My great-grandfather, when starting the company, came forward with a set of values which I think he held very dear. But we actually formalized this for the company only at the beginning of this century, only about 20 years ago. Before that, it was more understood, implied, rather than actually expressed. But the important issue for me is the beginning of the idea. Why did my great-grandfather decide to start this business? Because he wanted to treat the patient more efficiently. In those days, the idea was that every chemist would prepare his potion or his powder in the back of the shop and bring it back to the patient with understandable variation in quality. And industrializing it, sort of standardizing it, allowed for a more reasonable, rather a more standard quality of the goods that were sold. So at the origin is this idea of serving the patient. And I think that's one of the values we've been trying to uphold ever since. I think we should make a distinction between family values and business values, company values. The crystallization of the idea, the fact that we could actually put words to the feeling, it was something that we needed in terms of business because we wanted to make sure that it was standardized in a way that everybody could understand and use. So we spent quite some time defining this within the company, and we came back with 3 values: courage, integrity, and passion. This is a communication tool between the owner and the business, and we want to make sure that everybody revolves around these 3 values. Once you have defined those, you need, of course, to put up a system which allows you to live them. And you need to live these values every day. So how do you make sure that the 95,000 employees of Roche across the planet are behaving in a way that corresponds and includes these 3 values? And I think that's where the main job of the family is how can we ensure that we stay on course? And in that course setting, you need a clear view of these values. The purpose of Roche is not to make money. The purpose of Roche is to satisfy a community, and in particular to satisfy the patient's community. How can we bring new ideas which will make the life of the patient easier and perhaps even cure him? We believe that the relationship between the family and society is something that needs to be treated with respect and it needs to be treated in a consistent manner. And the fact that we meet and that we know each other and that we share the same history and the same culture is some sort of a glue which has allowed us over the past to really sort of talk with one voice. Family businesses have as a characteristic that they go from generation to generation. And so each generation has been united around the family business in the hope of transmitting this to the next generation. When the company takes a decision today, it will influence the 5th generation and perhaps also the 6th after the 5th, etc., etc. So the business thinking has to be transgenerational. And I think that is something that separates us from non-family owned businesses. So the concept of sustainability, which is so much in favor at the moment, I'm glad to say, is lived by the family. We are by definition there for the long term. So when you use our current definition, doing today what the patient needs tomorrow, there is very much this notion of we are here for the long term. And by the way, the patient does not only need medicine, he also needs a company that contributes to society in a positive manner. Our purpose as a company is not just to invent new medicine, it's also to behave like a good corporate citizen. We are now and more realizing at business level that long-term matters. Financial return is not sufficient to guarantee the survival of a company. In 2008, the whole financial system nearly collapsed because people had sort of taken the eye off the ball. We were concentrating on the short term. And I think for companies to be successful, they also need to be able to decide for the next generation, transgeneration, which is natural for family businesses, but not necessarily for publicly quoted ones. So at Roche, we have the great benefit of having a hybrid model. The family controls the majority of the vote, but does not control 50% of the quoted pieces of paper on the stock exchange. We have 2 types of security. We have the voting share, and we have a dividend certificate. That means that we are under the scrutiny of every investor on the planet. But the purpose in our case, it's a very clearly defined one. It's patients. We want to bring solution to the patients. I insist on the word solution because it's not just medicine, it's also access to medicine, it's also providing livelihoods in the country in which we are present, it's also husbanding natural resources in the best possible manner. So it's not just a financial return, it's also an environmental and social level. The purpose is not to make money. We define ourselves as an innovation company. In the past, our strapline used to be, we innovate healthcare. I thought that was a little bit too restrictive in terms of health, and now we have this broader definition of doing today what the patient needs tomorrow. But innovation is very much based on risk-taking. You have to be able to think, as the saying goes, outside of the box. You need to be able to enter into some sort of risk if you really want to be able to reap the rewards. And the rewards cannot be short-term financial. They have to be the satisfaction of the solution to the problem, often to the unmet medical need that comes your way. And this is a sort of value we try to promote within the company. Every day we want the people who work with us to go a little bit further, to be not afraid of going further. And they can do that in an environment where they know they are supported, an environment where they know that we share the same concern for the patient. We want them to be innovative because otherwise they will not be able to find the next solution. And that innovation, that focus on innovation requires passion. You cannot go home and say, well, today I've innovated. It's something you live, it's something that's in your blood, it's something that you have to. And we would like all of our employees to understand this passionate element of the job they do. And of course, integrity, you cannot interface with humanity in the long term. You cannot be relevant in the long term if you don't behave in an not in an integral, but in an integer manner. Yeah. The values and the communication around values is what keeps a group together. For us at Roche, we can write beautiful contracts, we can sign the best talent in the industry. If we don't tell them this is how we do it, and this is how Roche has done it, and this is how Roche will do it and will go in the long term, we're missing a part of the ingredient. So yes, I believe that these values, taken together, are a sort of they demonstrate that we are serious about what we're trying to do, and they give every stakeholder the conviction that it is worth participating to that effort as a piece of it. I mean, you've seen perhaps yesterday we published that we've been for the 10th consecutive years voted sustainability champion by the Dow Jones Index. That for us is 1 year is great, 2 years is fantastic, 10 years it means that it's embedded. People in the company take that seriously. And so the idea of having a pragmatic conversation with the fifth generation, where their interests and our interests are confronted, but not confronted in a confrontational manner, but are put together to come to a pragmatic solution. I'm very much looking forward to this. This is going to be an exciting process. My children and the children of my sisters are likely to join that group within the near future, and that moment will be very helpful because it will allow us to realign that contract that unites us in the way that satisfies their requirement. It's not going to be a surprise. We've been working on this for a long time, and we know each other well. But making it possible in a sort of formal framework will be a very interesting exercise. My father was a trained zoologist. His passion was birds, an ornithologist. He started ringing birds when he was 12 years old, and he spent most of his time studying bird migrations, most of his life, not time, studying bird migration and trying to understand the ecology of birds in their favorite environment. This led him to move to the Camargue in the south of France, in the Rhône Delta, and then led him to try to understand systems better, because birds only thrive in a well-functioning system, and become a specialist on wetlands. And he started then specializing on wetlands. And the idea of basing himself in the Camargue and concentrating on birds led to him understanding the challenge of humanity versus nature, and led to the creation of the World Wildlife Fund, which he was one of the co-founders, led to the Ramsar Convention on Protection of Wetlands, which he drafted and has been in effect for the past 40 years, and a couple of initiatives like this. I grew up in that environment, and for me, the first 20 years of my adult life, I spent a lot of time also trying to protect species and protected areas. I mean, today I'm more and more convinced that what matters is the interface between humanity and nature. and not just nature. I mean, the concept of natural nature is something that is a little bit difficult to imagine nowadays. We are everywhere on this planet. So I think it's important to also understand how we can shape our future, our harmony with nature, our balance with nature in the best possible manner. And precisely in that respect, companies have a great role to play. I believe strongly in business as a force for good, and that is an environment in which we can express this. We need to look at financial returns, because without that there's nothing, but we also need to look at environmental and social returns. And there we can close the loop to Roche. Since 10 years we are recognized as sustainable because we do concentrate on these fair returns. We still satisfy shareholders, we still have a profitable business, we still have a forward-looking business, but we are also minimizing our footprint and the impact of our footprint on society and on the environment. My dream is to position Roche and a number of other companies into this territory where they can become net contributor to societies and not the opposite. We live in a very polarized world, and the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and it's very much around this value creation phenomenon that people sort of antagonize. Over the past decades, value creation has been reserved to people who had the capital to start with. Very difficult to have the social mobility we used to see immediately after the Second World War. And I think that's the realization that business is not an enemy but an ally is the big shift, is a big change. We need to make sure that we change the vision of profit making in society at large. We've reached a position in which we are as a company because we innovate. And innovation becomes more and more difficult when you're in a big organization. A big organization tends to quite automatically really sort of come back constantly to the same ideas. So if you want to bring in, well, it's a bit of a cliche, but if you want to bring in outside of the box thinking, you need to be able to have your ears to the ground somewhere else. And the role of the non-executive shareholder, the non-executive owner, is very much along those lines. How do we stay connected to what's happening around us in order to help humanity as we do in our philanthropic activities, but also in order to help the business. So for me, innovation and venture is linked. There is a danger of separation of the interests of the owner and the interest of the business. And we've seen that in many places. Family businesses, after a while, the owners say, well, you know, we need to diversify. Let's sell the principal and invest into a portfolio of other companies, and then we can just sit back and run a family office. We've decided we would like to increase the risk. So perhaps that's the venture thinking we're talking about before, by keeping literally all our eggs in the same basket. But that allows us to have an influence on the business and to continue to influence it with our values, with our accumulated histories, while I hope continue to push this innovation aspect of the company. The role of family businesses is something I'm quite attached to. And I think the thing that makes family businesses successful, and I think the academic research backs that up, is this notion of, backs up the fact that family businesses are successful, is this notion of trust. Trust is something that we are completely lost in today's environment. I was talking before about the conflict between owners and non-owners. There is, of course, also a conflict between people you trust and people you don't trust. Trust is a complicated thing because we're saying trust is transparency and predictability. If I tell you what I do and if I don't spring any surprises on you, you're going to trust me. I would contend that if you trust somebody, you don't need to tell me what you're doing. If I know you're a good person and you're doing the right thing, why should you tell me what you're doing? I'm interested in the outcome, but the rest is perhaps not so important, as long as I can trust you. And that trust has gone, it's vanished. We have to justify everything we do at all levels. And that's, I think, is an impediment to true innovation.